Good afternoon. Today, our country is facing a national unity crisis, a crisis fueled by Justin Trudeau and his government's disregard for Western Canadians. Here in Alberta, you have had to endure Liberal policies that have stifled your growth. It's something that you experience every day. I know this because your Alberta Conservative MPs are constantly standing up to Justin Trudeau's anti-Alberta policies. It's time for the unfairness to end. Since 1967, Albertans have contributed more than $600 billion to the rest of Canada, and an average of more than $20 billion a year for the last decade. Even as your economy suffered with massive reductions in resource revenues, you as Albertans continued to pay more than your fair share to support the rest of the country. You have been there for Canada, so it's only fair that the rest of Canada be there for you. We know the Trudeau government and the other parties on the left do not respect the West. We see it time and time again. Canada's Conservatives believe that the federal government should work with the provinces as a partner, not dictate to them from office towers in Ottawa. Pour les conservateurs, le gouvernement fédéral doit être un partenaire des provinces. On ne doit pas leur dicter des politiques à partir de nos bureaux d'Ottawa. As the Alberta Court of Appeal recently reminded us, the federal government is not the parent, and the provincial governments are not its children. Instead of bullying and lecturing, a Conservative government will listen to the provinces, address their priorities, and respect their autonomy in areas of provincial jurisdiction. We will restore open and respectful federalism, and will treat the provinces as true partners in Confederation to division caused by the Trudeau Liberals. And I'm here to talk about the first step in that process today. Alberta is struggling, and you as Albertans quite reasonably expect the rest of the country, including the federal government, to be in your corner to fight with you. To begin to address the fact that you have consistently paid more than your fair share and helped fuel Canadian prosperity, a Conservative government will fix the Fiscal Stabilization Program. In 2019, Canada's premiers unanimously endorsed a proposal to reform the Fiscal Stabilization Program. Canada's Conservatives are committed to implementing the proposed changes and ensuring that provinces like Alberta receive retroactive compensation that your government can reinvest into programs creating jobs. This will give $5 billion back to those that were paying more than their fair share during some of their hardest years. While this equalization rebate will help several provinces, it will help Alberta the most. It will provide $4 billion to the people of Alberta, giving you back some of the extra money you've paid during the last few difficult years. And will pass the Equalization and Transfers Fairness Act, introduced by my Conservative colleague, MP Tom Comich, to improve transparency and make equalization fairer. Through the Council of the Federation, all of Canada's premiers endorsed a plan to treat resource revenues more fairly and to provide an equalization rebate to provinces impacted through the Fiscal Stabilization Program. But even when all the provincial partners in our federation were united, Justin Trudeau chose to ignore them. But to truly make Alberta prosperous again, we also need to take away the limits that the Trudeau Liberal government has put on your growth. As Albertans, I don't need to tell you that the parties on the left want to phase out the energy sector and the hundreds of thousands of Canadian working families who depend on it. Conservatives will treat the energy sector as a key driver of Canada's economy and leverage our global environmental and social governance leadership as a competitive advantage to secure our future. Our ESG-leading energy sector should be an asset in creating jobs and attracting investment. But the Liberals' anti-development policies are working against our growth. Without a predictable and consistent impact assessment process, investors will continue to stay away. We will fix the impact assessment process created by the divisive and ideological Bill C-69, the anti-pipeline bill, so that it upholds the best-in-class environmental standards with clear expectations and fair timelines. This way, investors will have the confidence they need to commit to the jobs and investment that our country so desperately needs in our economic recovery. On prend les changements climatiques au sérieux. On ne doit pas laisser la bureaucratie retarder les projets de réduction de gaz à effet de serre. Pour faire avancer les choses, on va accélérer l'examen des projets de réduction des émissions. Taking climate change seriously includes not letting critical GHG-reducing projects to be held up by red tape and long reviews. We will fast-track review of emissions-reducing projects to get shovels in the ground. Conservatives are also committed to putting an end to the tanker ban in British Columbia. The Trudeau government arbitrarily banned the export of Canadian energy from British Columbia's coast against the expressed wishes of many local communities and Indigenous leaders. We will also get Trans Mountain built. Despite Mr. Trudeau's rhetoric, the construction of the pipeline has faced numerous delays. Conservatives will get the job done. Canada is blessed with an abundant supply of clean and affordable natural gas. With much of the world still reliant on coal-generated electricity, we should be boosting exports to grow our economy and to contribute to a cleaner world. Projects like LNG Canada and GNL Québec create jobs for Canadians while benefiting the world. That's why we will implement a federal LNG export strategy. Canada must show our global ESG leadership and help reduce emissions around the world while creating jobs at home. After 6 years, it's clear the Trudeau Liberals have left Western Canadians behind, and you're frustrated. You should be. But I'm here to offer you a clear choice. More of the same from Justin Trudeau's Liberals and the other parties on the left, or restoring fairness in the West with Canada's Conservatives. Contrairement aux partis de gauche, on sait qu'un avenir plus vert se construit avec des emplois. L'un ne peut aller sans l'autre. Conservatives understand that we cannot build a greener future if Canadians don't have jobs. Conservatives and all Canadians know that you cannot unite this great country if the Liberals and their partners in Ottawa are always holding big parts of it back. There is only one party that is capable of forming government that will fix this unfairness for Alberta, and that's Canada's Conservatives. Western Canadians deserve respect and a secure future. Beginning to address equalization through this rebate is an important first step. Before we go to questions, I also want to address something very troubling that's just come up today. Justin Trudeau is continuing his war on Canadian small business, refusing to implement a tax reduction for small business that was passed in Parliament. When the Prime Minister decides to raise your taxes, he'll go to extraordinary and unprecedented lengths to actually ignore Parliament, ignore the law, all in the pursuit of sending your tax dollars to Ottawa. The continued corruption, the delays and cover-ups in Ottawa continues even after Parliament ends. It's shameful, and I think Canadians deserve better. Thank you, and I'm ready for your questions.
And we'll now be taking questions. A quick reminder, as usual, one question, one follow-up. Petit rappel, une question avec une question de suivi. Today, Mr. O'Toole will have time for 8 questions. Aujourd'hui, Mr. O'Toole aura le temps pour 8 questions. And our first question.
Hi, Mr. O'Toole. Adam McVicker with Global News here in Calgary. I'm just wondering, so if you are elected and these changes are made to the equalization rebate, or the fiscal stabilization rebate for equalization, how will that be paid for?
It will be paid for by the federal government because the stabilization fund has not been working. The premiers have acknowledged that. All premiers acknowledge that it needs to be fixed for provinces particularly that see fluctuations in resource revenues. So the provinces that continued to pay more than their fair share when their economy was going down, that is inherently unfair. So an equalization rebate is the way that all provinces have said our federation should work. It's time for Ottawa to start listening to the partners in this federation. The country has become incredibly divided under Mr. Trudeau, and we need to unite this country and get everyone working. They deserve better than what they're getting in Ottawa.
Hey there, it's Alana Smith with the Canadian Press. What do you say to Western Conservative supporters who disagree with the direction you've taken with the party, like introducing a carbon price in hopes of winning more seats in Ontario?
I am proud of our Canadian energy sector. In fact, 31 years ago this summer, I inspected pipeline for TransCanada Pipelines, one of my first jobs, back when the company had Canada in its name. That sector we need to see come back for Alberta and for Canada. And ESG leadership, which I talked about, environmental social governance leadership, is the way to do it, to make sure that we can bring our resources and our energy to the world while showing a commitment to reducing emissions. Our plan does that. It's modeled. It's far superior to the Liberals' tax plan because it focuses on creating jobs and investment while making our emission commitments. That's my commitment. I'm proud to have it held up alongside Mr. Trudeau's and the other parties on the left that just want to close down the economy to make their commitments. I'm showing that a smart Conservative plan that gets people back to work will do it.
Another question for you. Let's say an election was called today. How much support do you think you have here in Western Canada and especially Alberta, considering you haven't really been able to travel because of COVID-19?
COVID-19. It's great to see a few less masks here because Alberta's opening up. People are worried about rebuilding their lives. Can you imagine Mr. Trudeau's putting his own political skin first, covering up everything in Parliament, the most corrupt government in my lifetime, and he's posturing for an election. We will be ready, but our plan to recover, the 5-point recovery plan we have, fixing fiscal stabilization with an equalization rebate, this is what we're proposing now. If Mr. Trudeau wants to hide his own record, continued corruption, we'll leave Canadians to make the decision at that time, but I think Canadians, including here in Alberta, want to see the country move forward again, want to see an economic recovery, including in our energy sector. They want to see unity in this country again, and they're not going to get it from a prime minister that has divided this country from his first days in office.
And next question.
Bonjour. Bonjour, Axel Tardieu pour Radio-Canada. Quel message vous voulez donner aujourd'hui aux conservateurs albertains, sachant qu'il y a un sondage en avril dernier qui est sorti, votre popularité est en baisse en Alberta. Est-ce que vous essayez de regagner le cœur des Albertains aujourd'hui?
Je suis fier de notre parti ici en Alberta et nos députés extraordinaires ici. Et on va travailler ensemble pour une relance économique dans chaque secteur de notre économie, incluant le secteur énergétique. Et c'est pourquoi aujourd'hui, je viens d'annoncer notre plan de corriger notre système de fiscalité, stabilisation. On doit faire ça pour unir notre pays. Et après ça, on va gagner ici et d'une nation à l'autre.
Et votre question de suivi?
Hi, Bill Graveland from Canadian Press. The Prime Minister yesterday, after meeting with Premier Kenney, told reporters that Mr. Kenney's complaints about the Equalization Program are a little hollow since the formula was actually developed by the Harper government. Any thoughts on that?
When I hear the word hollow in relation to Mr. Trudeau, he is our hollow Prime Minister. No ethics, dividing the country, no plan for an economic recovery post-COVID, and the fact that he's ignoring not just Albertans and not just the Premier of Alberta, the Council of the Federation, which is now chaired by Premier Legault. They agree with what I'm proposing we will do today. To unite this country, there's one choice for Albertans, for Canadians. It's the Conservative Party of Canada. We will heal the division caused by Mr. Trudeau's ideological policies. We will give the rebate to provinces to help them through difficult times. We have a 5-point plan to get the economy and the country back on track after COVID-19. We deserve a government that is ethical, ready, and will get the country working again.
The argument, though, that the plan that's in place right now was developed by the Harper government.
The rebate approach is not the underlying program. What this rebate approach allows the fiscal stabilization to recognize when provinces see a steep drop in resource revenue. It is completely unfair for that to continue. So the provinces made this decision in 2019. If you see what's happened since then, the fact that the Prime Minister has still not acknowledged, we will acknowledge, we will fix it going forward, and we will make it retroactive. Our Confederation is at risk under Mr. Trudeau. We have national unity issues in several provinces that were simply not there when the Conservatives were in power, and we respected the partners in our federation, the provinces. This is the first step to reestablishing respect, dealing with national unity, and getting this country moving again.
And next question.
Sorry, Alana Smith again with the Canadian Press. I appreciate your response on COVID-19, but I'm just going to push on the first part of that question. How much support do you think you have in Western Canada and specifically Alberta today?
I'm very proud of our team here, and I think we will not only hold our seats whenever an election comes, we're going to go after the last one, because I can't see anyone living in this province that hasn't seen the attack on Alberta's prosperity, on its way of life that has been conducted by Justin Trudeau from his first minutes in office. In his first trip abroad, he mocked the energy sector, a sector that has contributed $600 billion to our economy since 1967. I worked for the sector several times in my career, not in Alberta. Alberta's energy success is Canada's success. So if anyone wants to not only get the economy moving again, but to deal with the underlying fissures in our federation, they were not there 6 years ago when I was serving in a Conservative cabinet, because there was respect. We need to reestablish that respect, and this is the first step today.
And that's all the questions we have today. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you very much.